radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Yaron Brook Show on this, here in Tokyo, it's Thursday, December 12th. My assumption is most of you are still, no, it's not, sorry. Here in Tokyo, it's Friday, December 13th, Friday the 13th. I assume that most of you are still on Thursday. If you're in Europe, maybe you already slipped into Friday, but most of you in the US are on Thursday. I apologize for the weird hour. I know it's late, but I guess my viewership today will consist of primarily West Coasters, who where it's not that offensively late. As you know, I am traveling around the world, literally around the world. The world is round, by the way. I checked. It's definitely round, no flat Earth. And I will be going on the last leg of this tour. This afternoon, where I fly from Tokyo to New York. I think that's like a 15-hour flight, and then New York to San Juan, which is another 4-hour flight. So it's going to be a long, long day. The funny thing is, I leave Tokyo at around 5 o'clock Tokyo time on Friday, and I arrive in New York at around 5 o'clock on Friday. So there you go. I mean, I guess it's a 13-hour flight because it's exactly the same. So it's pretty. This whole time zone thing, particularly when you cross the date line, is pretty bizarre and weird. So I leave and I arrive basically at the same time. So I do have a bit on the plane. I'm flying business. I don't fly coach on long flights. So yes, I'm in Tokyo. I have a stunning view from my hotel room. It's just beautiful. You've got the water from, I guess, the bay and the river, and you've got all the skyscrapers of Tokyo. I mean, there are more cranes than I remember in previous visits on Tokyo. So there definitely seems to be some economic activity here. There's more development going on than I remember in the past. Maybe I remember badly. But Tokyo is this massive city that goes on for tens of miles in each direction. You can't, I mean, mostly in my trips here, I've stayed in the kind of the center of Tokyo, although once I had a meeting with a Japanese insurance company, and it was way out in, I don't know, it was still Tokyo, but it took forever to get there. It took probably an hour to get there, and it was still Tokyo. And it just continues and continues and continues. Anyway, what else did I want to tell you? Yes, I did 2 events yesterday here in Tokyo, both on the Romantic Manifesto. Romantic Manifesto has come out in Japanese. I mean, that has to be exciting, right? That Ayn Rand's Romantic Manifesto is out in Japanese. It's out already. Digital version, no hard copy. They've also got The Virtue of Selfishness. They've got Atlas Shrugged. They've got Fountainhead. They might have some other books, but I think next they're going to be working on Capitalism. I don't know, an ideal to get that translated. But Romantic Manifesto. So I had really interesting discussions yesterday. All of them videotaped, so they'll be up online at some point. Although translated into Japanese, so it'll be very difficult to follow. We won't be cutting out the Japanese, so you'll get me speaking English, translator speaking Japanese. Translator is a good friend of mine, Yoshi, who's every time I come over the last 10 years to Japan, we've been doing events together. He's the translator, but he's also very, very knowledgeable in Objectivism, and as a consequence, I'm told his translations are excellent. Anyway, we talked a lot about art, a lot about what is art, why modern art is not art. We talked about what the role of art in human life is, and the importance of art for human life and for human beings and for human survival. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. Very challenging. It's very hard for people to accept that modern art is not art. And to a large extent, it's because, well, I mean, everybody says it is. Everybody. All the experts do. And the museums have it. And who am I to define art, or who is Ayn Rand to define art in a particular way? And it's so ingrained, right? Since Duchamp put a frame around a urinal and put it up in a museum, anything is art. We talked about the banana that was taped to a plaque of wood and sold for $6 million as a work of art, and then the person who bought it ate it. But people resist it. They want it to be art. They want it to be art because that's what the convention says, and they have a really hard time understanding Ayn Rand's definition. They have a really hard time. They can see perceptually the difference between Michelangelo's David and a piece of, gobbled metal in front of a building, but they don't have the self-esteem, they don't have the confidence, they don't have the conceptual confidence to say one is art and one is not. There's a certain, and I understand that completely. I understand that completely. So people generally, given the educational system, given how art is taught, given the authorities, given everybody around us, is telling us constantly that we're wrong, it's very hard to stand up and say, no. And maybe in art, it's even more because people are not confident in the language of art. They're not confident in what is art. They're not confident in the role of art. It's hard. It's complicated philosophically. And they just lack the conceptual confidence, the conceptual certainty of how to defend it, particularly against very sophisticated opponents who have the backing of the entire elite society and all the intellectuals behind them. So very difficult for people to think in this sense out of the box and to accept something radical. It's almost like capitalism's easiest comparison because, well, we have elements of capitalism and capitalism is more understandable. I think art is much more difficult for them. Anyway, it was interesting and fascinating and fun and great questions, and some of the questions quite philosophical, but postmodernism and Nietzsche and the Enlightenment and the role each one played, and so I had fun, and I think you never know. I like the idea of planting seeds all over the world. Part of the pitch yesterday was go read Atlas Shrugged, experience art, and it's in Japanese, it's in English, do it, but it's I like the idea of planting seeds all over the world. I like the idea that the fact is we don't know where our future intellectuals are going to come from. We don't know what their background is going to be. We for years ignored Europe, and now a significant number of our intellectuals, our new intellectuals, our rising intellectuals are Europeans. We ignored South America, and again, a significant, South America and Europe, more people at ARU from South America and Europe than from the United States combined. So who knows? Why not Asia? That is, why not? Language is a big problem. Cultural context, I think, is a big problem. Part of the issue with art is how do you bring that cultural context? I mean, how do you talk about art that they might not be familiar with because they've just never been exposed to it because they live in a place that wasn't part of that artistic revolution. But then that's somewhat true of the United States. And then there's, of course, Japanese art and I don't have a lot to say about Japanese art. There's some Japanese art I really like Akira Kurosawa movies. Whoops, what happened? What happened? Are we on? Oh, no, we're streaming. Are you guys there? Just checking to see if you guys are there. 1, 2, 3. Anybody there? Nobody's responding? I don't know. Are we on or not? Are we streaming or not? Maybe we are. Let's see. Okay. You're on. His chat might be behind. My chat was frozen. Okay, all is good. Good. I see it's catching up. Cool. Let's see. Okay, so that's Japan. I was here for a really short time. I arrived Wednesday evening, went out to dinner with some folks and met a modern artists. We had some interesting conversation and got to meet a bunch of Japanese. Went to kind of a small party, but I came back to the hotel room because I was so tired after the flight from Australia. Then yesterday spent all day basically. Oh, we did go to, I forget the name of this thing. We did go to this one kind of museum here. What's it called? I've got the name here. Team Lab. It's you go into this place and it's experiential. They're like floating colors and patterns and butterflies and flowers and crystals and all kinds of things going on. And different rooms have different themes and different things happening. And it's really it's very pleasant, very soothing. Some of it's interesting, some of it's kind of cool. It's presented as a museum. It's presented as art. It's not art, but it's interesting. If you're ever in Tokyo, it's worth going. Team Lab. I think they're opening up all over the world now. They're expanding. So Team Lab Museum. It's probably worth doing. Again, Tokyo itself, sprawling, big, interesting. It's on the one. It's very different than a Western city. The way the malls are structured, the way the restaurants are, the way high-rise buildings, the bottom floors are kind of half stores and restaurants, and it's just a fascinating, very different world. And so I encourage you. I think everybody should travel to Asia, see different culture. It's exotic, it's different, it's strange a little bit, but it's also wonderful. I mean, the other thing about Tokyo, and I'll just mention this, and then we'll go into some news. Not that long ago, when was it? 1945. So we're talking about 80 years ago, just under 80 years ago, right? This city was in ashes. There was just nothing here. Tokyo had been repeatedly firebombed. It had been destroyed. Everything here was flattened. There were a few existing structures that survived, but most of the city was gone. That was true of every major Japanese city. And of course, 2 of them had been nuked. So if you think, so Japan was in complete destruction. And here we are 80 years later, and Tokyo is this thriving metropole. It's Western in many significant ways, in the kind of buildings it has, in the businesses, in the way people behave. It's got its own unique culture, but the wealth, the industriousness, the productiveness of the people, the restaurants, Tokyo has more Michelin-starred restaurants than anywhere in the world. I think that's true. The food, how amazing is that? How this is kind of proof that you can take any place in the world, and you put in the right policies and you have the right culture, it can thrive and boom and be successful. People here live long. They generally seem pretty satisfied. The economy's not doing great for all kinds of reasons. And there are real problems that Japan is going to face in the next 10 years. Wouldn't be surprised if you got some social unrest given the financial problems that they're heading into. But overall, it's an amazing place given where it's come from. And so there's a lot of them asking, no, very few. I mean, masking in Asia before COVID, and I think it's back to that, is basically something you do if you're not feeling well. So for example, when I arrived here, the guy picked me up at the airport to take us to the restaurant was wearing a mask, and he says, look, I've got a cough. I don't want to cough on you. I don't want to give you the virus or whatever, so I'm wearing a mask. And that is basically, it's not to get something, it's not to infect you. So if you see somebody in the street who's wearing a mask, they've probably got a cough or they've probably got a cold or they're not feeling well. Mostly, I'm sure there's some who are just afraid of germs or whatever. But in that sense, I think it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing, right? I mean, they're sick. They don't want other people to get sick, so they wear a mask. So Japan has very much returned to pre-COVID behavior. You know, when I was here in 2022, I was here just as Japan was opening up from the COVID COVID had locked down the country. You couldn't travel to Japan. There was no way to get in. And they just opened up. And I was literally one of the first flights, I think, coming in. Everybody was masked. Everybody. I mean, me and Yoshi, my friend here, we were the only ones walking around Tokyo, going in the subway, walking around the streets and the parks and everywhere without a mask. Everybody else was masked. Even when they were alone on the street, they were masked. So it was like I think mainly for conformity reasons. It was the thing to do. Everybody masked up. That is gone. So we're back to pre-COVID where people mask if they're not feeling well, if there's a threat that they will infect other people. Okay, let's jump into the news. We'll do this kind of quick. I don't have any kind of big in-depth analysis here, although I do want to talk about the shooter of the United Healthcare a little bit more. But let's see if I can find. Yeah, there it is. And so I want to talk about that and health insurance. So that'll be the main thing, and then we'll cover a few other items in the news fairly quickly, and then I'll take your Super Chat questions. So don't forget to ask Super Chat questions. $20 plus Super Chat questions get priority. And please do some of those. We do have targets for these shows. We need to reach those targets. So please participate. I'll also just remind you that we will have the big fundraising show on December 31st. We're going to try to raise $15,000. The show will last until we get to that number. Hopefully 3, 4, 5 hours will be enough. But hopefully those of you listening, not live right now, will be able to join us for a little bit. It'll be December 31st, 1 p.m. East Coast time. We'll start, and we'll keep going. So please join us on December 31st. It'll be a fun show, and we'll cover kind of events of the last year. We'll try to look into the future a little bit and talk about what's going to happen. But of course, the main thing is I'll answer all your questions. Just bring tons of questions, and I'll answer them. All right, let's see. Let's talk about the shooter. So obviously we now know who the shooter of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson is, or we think we do. He's innocent until proven guilty, of course. But he is in custody, and the evidence is accumulating, and it's hard to believe. It's hard to believe that he's not the guy. It's possible, but it's hard to believe so. One of the things that we know is that this guy wrote a manifesto, a short manifesto written by the suspected killer. And you know, this is, let's see. Okay. Okay. So let's read what he has to say. He writes, to the feds, I'll keep this short because I do respect what you do for our country. Oh, he's a patriot. To save you a lengthy investigation, I state plainly that I wasn't working with anyone. This was fairly trivial, some elementary social engineering, basic CAD, a lot of patience. The spiral notebook, if present, has some strangling notes and to-do lists that illustrate the gist of it. So he's explaining, you know, how he pulled this off. My tech is pretty locked down because I work in engineering, so probably not much info there. I do apologize for any strife or trauma, but it had to be done. We're talking about somebody who just killed a CEO in cold blood. I mean, very coolly, like a pro would. It is surprising. He says, frankly, these parasites simply had it coming. And he goes on, a reminder, right? The US has the #1 most expensive healthcare system in the world, yet we rank roughly 42nd in life expectancy. So, okay, let's take some of the facts and, you know, so, well, let's just note first, a lot of people now support this guy. He has become a hero to a certain, you know, I think subsection of our society. And I think this crosses political lines. I don't think this is just a leftist thing. I think it's across lines. They're now in New York City. I saw there's an article in the Wall Street Journal that there are now wanted signs in New York City, like wanted signs with pictures for healthcare executives and Wall Street executives. Just, you know, wanted for crimes against humanity. The posters all over the place. They're also free Luigi. Luigi is the shooter. Free Luigi signs all over the place. Yeah, I mean, if I were an executive in Wall Street right now or in an insurance company, I'd be worried. Hopefully they're beefing up security. I don't think we're going to see a lot of copycat shooters. It takes a lot for somebody to do this, and it takes a certain instability, emotional, mental instability to do it. Yeah. Okay. So the hatred in this country of insurance companies, the hatred of our healthcare system, you saw this partially in my debate at Cambridge, but that was in England, but it exists in the United States. People hate insurance companies. They hate, I mean, one of the stories about the shooter is about Luigi, is that he had lower back pain and he had surgery, and I haven't seen any stories that he was denied coverage or it cost him a lot of money or anything like that. I mean, I've had surgery. I had big surgery I've got screws in my back, and you know, I had a fusion surgery in my lower back years ago. I mean, I had a private room in the hospital. I had fantastic care. I spent 5 days in the hospital, I think, because they had to actually do 2 surgeries to get it completely right. I spent hours and hours and hours on the operating table. I mean, I think the first surgery was like 9 hours, and the second 3 or 4. Great care, great doctors, great nurses, really good hospital. And I don't remember what my out-of-pocket expenses were, but they weren't high. I mean, the insurance company covered it all. By the way, I'm pretty sure it was United Healthcare. They covered it all. I've had no, now maybe it's just I'm lucky, I have no negative experiences with American insurance companies, but I can imagine some people do. But for every person who's had a negative experience with an insurance company, there are tens of thousands of people who, you know, got great care. Great care because of the insurance companies. It's a business. The other funny thing is about, you know, these insurance companies, they make a lot of money off of you. But the profit margins of insurance companies are very low, something like 6%. Apple's profit margin is 25%. It's a highly competitive business. And it's an interesting business. Insurance companies are probably the ones who make the least amount of money in the healthcare supply chain. Doctors, hospitals are jacking up prices. Insurance companies are the ones trying to keep prices low, and their profit margins are pretty small. But we hate them. The fear is, of course, that this hatred is going to generate significant backlash against the American system and significant striving to socialize, to get rid of whatever private elements exist in it, to make it some kind of single payer, to get rid of the insurance companies, to get rid of the profit margin they have at all. And that will take the quality of American healthcare significantly backwards. So, I mean, he makes claims here about it being the most expensive healthcare system in the world and number 42 in life expectancy. So let's take those two claims first. Yes, the U.S. System is expensive. But when you compare the cost of healthcare in the United States to how much money we have, that is to the wealth of individuals, that is to the consumption behavior of individuals, then it doesn't look that expensive. Yeah, we pay a lot of money for healthcare, but we probably pay a lot of money for everything because we have a lot of money. So when you control for how rich a country is, we don't pay that much. And here, rich is not just income. It's not GDP per capita. I think one of the more interesting measures of richness is actual individual consumption per capita. I'm getting this out of an article by Cremiux, C-R-E-M-I-U-X, who kind of analyzes all this. He does a lot of stat stuff. Some of it I don't like, but a lot of it is very good. Anyway, the U.S. does not spend that much more if you take into account the fact that the U.S. is rich. On a consumption level, and how much we consume as individuals, we consume more than anybody else in the world, pretty much. Like Norway, I think on a GDP per capita is richer than the U.S., like GDP per capita. But because that GDP per capita doesn't actually make it to individuals, it's mostly in the hands of government and the oil business and a few big businesses. Individuals don't actually get it. It's just an average. U.S. individuals spend more money because we're actually richer than Norwegians, in spite of the fact that GDP per capita is higher in Norway. It's an interesting quirk of the statistics, which is worth looking at. Ireland, for example, has very high GDP per capita, but Irish people are not very rich, are not very wealthy, because most of that capital, most of that GDP is held by corporations that have their headquarters in Ireland, and then it's divided by the population as if that GDP gets distributed to the population, but it doesn't. In the United States, we, as consumers, have more of that GDP than most other countries. Our taxes are lower, for example. So you can look. We'll do a more in-depth analysis of the American healthcare system on another show to see why these fallacies are fallacies. That is, we don't spend that much more, and that it's basically an example of the fact that because we're rich, we can afford more. So, for example, I get an MRI every year, full body MRI, to make sure I don't have cancer. That goes into the stats for how much money the U.S. spends on healthcare. First of all, the U.S. doesn't spend it. I spend it. I spend it actually out of pocket. The insurance doesn't cover it. And I do it for prevention's sake, which is going to result in hopefully me living longer. Probably doesn't change the average life expectancy, and it seems, from the perspective of a bureaucrat, it seems wasted. It seems wasted because they don't find anything, hopefully, when they do the scan. I don't get any treatment. I just had a wasteful MRI that found nothing. The United States, for example, we have more surgeries. This is, again, from this article. More surgeries than anybody else. So we spend a lot of money because we have more surgeries. Why do we have more surgeries? We can talk about that for all kinds of reasons. But we do have more surgeries by a large margin, which explains a lot of why we spend more money on healthcare. And it's just not honest to blame poor life expectancy on healthcare. The reality is that much of the poor life expectancy has to do with drug overdoses. It has to do with, violent crime, which in many countries is much lower than it is. Homicides are much lower than they are in the United States. It has to do with accidents and alcohol abuse and a lot of other things, and maybe most importantly, it also has to do with obesity. It has to do with lifestyle. Lifestyle that is not determined by your doctor. You determine it. Too many Americans abuse their bodies and die young because they die unnecessarily because of self-inflicted diseases, because of lack of exercise and overeating and getting obese and all of that. So, so for example, John Hopkins life expectancy report says that 57% of the life expectancy gap between the US and the UK was because of cardiovascular disease. Another 32% was because of drug overdose, and 20% was because of firearm-related homicides and suicides, and 17% was due to motor vehicle accidents. So here you have drug overdose, firearms, and motor vehicle, explaining, what is this, 32 plus 20 plus 17. I mean, that's 60-something percent, right? Now, I don't know, these numbers don't exactly add up. So, in other words, that has nothing to do with our healthcare system. Now, heart disease is true, but that's not because our doctors are not good. We don't provide enough drugs. We don't provide the good medicine. We don't screen. We do all that. We do all that. But what we can control, what we cannot control, is people's lifestyle choices. So 90% of the gap for men and 2/3 of the gap for women in life expectancy is explained by non-healthcare related stuff. All right. Generally, by the way, we do much better in the United States than Europe and UK and other places on things like cancer and cancer survivability. All right, so I will do a deep analysis into the U.S. healthcare system, how it functions, why we pay more money, what about the whole life expectancy thing. That deserves a whole show in and of itself. And of course, we have to remember that what we have in the United States is far from a free market. We have a heavily regulated healthcare market, which is far from free. I mean, the killer in this case was not a United customer, not a United Healthcare customer from what we can tell. And he had back surgery that went fine. So it's hard to understand. It's hard to see a personal grudge here. And it's more this philosophical view or completely corrupted view about the profit motive and about the evil of the American healthcare system, which is basically built on lies. Basically built on lies. All right. Let's see, where are we? Just another reminder that we've got $80 to go in terms of meeting our first hour goal. 4 $20 questions get us there. So please consider doing that in the next 20 minutes, which is our first hour. All right. Scary times, I think. The idea that people in New York and other places are seeing wanted signs for executives. I mean, there is the anti-capitalist mentality, the anti-capitalist view, the hatred of the profit motive is strong right now in America. It is strong in America. And how we're going to overcome this, how we're going to change it, how we're going to survive the next period of envy and hatred, I'm not exactly sure. We will have to see how that goes. But as I said, I don't think this is purely a left-right thing. I think that, as you know, I think people both on the left and the right are pretty anti-capitalist and anti-profit motive. This is a deep cultural thing that resents self-interest, that resents capitalism, that resents profit, that sees the world as a zero-sum game. And there's nobody today with a large audience trying to dissuade people from the idea that the capitalist economy is a zero-sum game. Somebody has to do that work. All right, let's talk quickly about the Middle East, catch you up. There's a lot of talk about a potential ceasefire in Gaza. It looks like Hamas and Israel are closer than they have been in a very long time to some kind of deal, a deal that would release probably about 30 hostages of the 100 or so hostages and alive and dead that Hamas holds. Hamas is claiming they can only identify and find 30. They don't know where the others are, which could very well be a lie because they want to hold hostages for future negotiations. They have demanded the release of Palestinian prisoners. They have given in to a few of Israel's demands, like Israel staying in Gaza and holding on to the Philadelphia. It would be a 60-day ceasefire. Not sure what happens then. And of course, nothing in there suggesting what the long-term solution is and what this looks long-term. There definitely seems to be a sense in Hamas that, there was hope in Hamas that Iran would come to save them, that Hezbollah continuing to harass Israel would ultimately release the pressure on them, that the Syria and the Shiite Iranian-affiliated militias might attack in the north and save them. The Houthis will keep bombing Israel and save them. And basically that has completely collapsed. So, I know a lot of people are going to give Donald Trump credit for Hamas moderating its position. But the reality is they now face a world in which Hezbollah is gone. It basically is not a threat to Israel and is not bombing Israel and is not distracting Israel from what needs to be done in Gaza. Israel's still in southern Lebanon, hasn't left yet. But basically, it's mop-up operations and cleanup operations. There's not going to be any sustained effort. Gaza is not going to be saved by Hezbollah. The Iranians are mute. They've silenced themselves. Basically, they've lost their main ally or one of their main allies in the Middle East, Hezbollah, and then they lost Syria, a major, a major hub for their activities, a major place in which they could transport equipment, weapons to Hezbollah in Lebanon. The loss of Syria is a massive blow to Hezbollah, to Iran. Iran has also been shown to be a paper tiger. Israel basically eviscerated its air defense systems and showed that it could basically bomb anything. Basically, Hamas has come to the conclusion, and this is a conclusion it's come to because of Israel's actions, that it will not survive, that it cannot sustain this, and its best path for surviving and rising up again in the future is to cut a deal. And so they're cutting a deal. And Israel, I think mistakenly is also, Israel mistakenly, or not mistakenly, feels under pressure, both internally by the Israeli population really wants a deal, really wants the hostages released, or some of the hostages released, But also, Israel is under pressure from Trump. Israel wants to be on Trump's good side. Israel wants Trump as a friend. Every indications are that Trump will be, but Trump is basically demanding that violence stop in Gaza. So I think Israel's basically saying, okay, we'll cut a deal. We want to cut a deal before Trump is in office to show goodwill towards Trump. So we now have, it now looks like there will be a deal in the next few days. I think this is a mistake. I don't think you can argue that you want to completely destroy an organization that you then negotiate with. You know, the very fact that you're negotiating with says that they're legitimate and says that, you're giving them, you're sanctioning their existence. So Gaza is worth watching. We'll continue to watch it and see what happens. Things are quiet. The leadership of Hamas is quiet. The military capabilities are basically being diminished completely. They're still there. They're still active. They're still training new people. They're still stealing aid. They're still doing all these things. But their political, but primarily the military power is basically being eviscerated. At the same time, Syria, as we know, the Assad regime has collapsed. These other forces, a variety of different elements from within Syria are now taking control of different parts of the country. It does look like there is a certain consolidation of power around the Islamist group that came in from the north. They are the dominant force, but they are claiming that they are liberal now and they are open, and I read somewhere that they want to establish a free market in Syria. Who knows? That they are going to tolerate the minorities and they're going to tolerate non-Islamists, and they don't want war, and they want a thriving Syria. We'll see how long this lasts. And they are slowly taking control of Syria. Israel is not taking chances. It is basically, as I've told you before, destroying everything the Syrian army had that could be used by these new political forces, military forces, to attack Israel. Israel is destroying from the air. It's also put troops on the ground and created a buffer zone around the Golan Heights. They're building trenches. They're building intelligence capabilities. They took the Hermon mountain, where they can now observe the actions of all their enemies, both in Lebanon and in Syria. The mountain actually blocked a lot of Israel's intelligence capabilities. Now they basically control the tallest peak in the region. So the consolidation of power in Syria continues. How it all evolves and how it all plays out, we still don't know. We still don't know the very nature of the people who are taking control right now. And we don't know the intentions of their big ally, which is Turkey. So it's going to be an interesting few months, few years to see how all of that pans out. Anything else I want to say about Syria? We've talked about Russia and the defeat Russia took there, and the fact that they're retreating, and they've evacuated their forces from there. So, yeah, I mean, Syria is part of this completely new realignment in the Middle East that's going to be really interesting, and at least in the short run, is very good for Israel. In the long run, it's hard to tell. But in the short run, it weakens Iran, Israel's number one enemy, and of course, Israel's already taking care of the rest of its enemies. Okay, a few other stories. This one's an interesting one. So everybody's excited about DOGE, right? DOGE, about Elon Musk and Vivek. As I travel around the world, everybody here is excited about DOGE. I get questions about DOGE and Elon Musk and Trump in Japan. I got it in Australia and everywhere else. So there was a really intriguing Wall Street Journal article today about the intention of DOGE to shut down some of the financial regulatory agencies. Here is the headline of the Wall Street Journal article. Trump advisors seek to shrink or eliminate bank regulators. And it turns out that along with the Treasury Secretary, DOGE people from DOGE are actually interviewing some of the financial regulators for positions like head of the FDIC, head of the Office of the Control of the Currency, and so on. There's even talk about abolishing the FDIC. And I read this and I go, whoa, maybe I was wrong. Maybe these are true capitalists, and maybe they really want to put the whole financial industry on a capitalist footing, and they want to completely defang the regulators and get rid of the FDIC. Now, always keep on reading after you read something like that. But it turns out that's not exactly what they want to do. What they want to do is cut headcount, which is good. They want to fire people, which is good. So, for example, they don't want to get rid of deposit insurance, and I don't see anywhere in the article or anywhere that I've seen that they want to reform deposit insurance in a significant way. What they want to do is get rid of the FDIC and move deposit insurance to the Treasury, and thus reduce the number of people maybe that work at these places. They're also looking at the Office of the Controller of the Currency and looking at its regulatory function and saying, well, wait a minute, the FDIC regulates banks, the Office of the Controller of the Currency regulates banks, and the Federal Reserve regulates banks. They don't want to stop regulating banks, as far as I can tell. But they want to consolidate that. Maybe we should have one entity. Now, this was something that the Bush administration wanted to do. This is even something that was discussed seriously during the Obama administration coming out of 2008. The idea was, why do we have so many regulatory agencies regulating banks? There are like 5, 6 of them. Why don't we consolidate them all into one? And there was some talk, and there was some real proposals to bring it all under the Federal Reserve, and that didn't play well. And then in the end, none of that happened. Dodd-Frank was supposed to do that. It was supposed to consolidate the number of regulators, and partially because the banks don't want it, because the banks like playing the regulators off one another. Now, they also hate it because the different regulators have different requirements, and it creates a lot of confusion and uncertainty. But they also like it because they might be able to manipulate the people at the OCC, but not the people at the FDIC, or they can use the OCC people to put pressure on the FDIC people. Banks probably like the fragmented system. Congress likes the fragmented system. So there are a lot of special interest groups, there are a lot of pressure groups, there are a lot of people who want this. So as I'm reading this, and my hopes are slowly diminishing because it sounded like they want to get rid of the FDIC, which means get rid of deposit insurance. No, they want to keep deposit insurance, just move it to somewhere else. And it sounds like they want to get rid of the Office of Control of the Currency. No, they want to take all the functioning of the Office of Control of the Currency and integrate it into one entity, taking the regulatory part of the Fed, the OCC, and the FDIC, and create a new super regulator, which might be more efficient and might save money. But and it will reduce uncertainty for banks. That's good. So I'm not against it. I think it's good. But it's not the revolution that the headline of the article and many people out there are suggesting is going to happen with DOGE and everything else. So in that sense, it's kind of, disappointing. Now, the one big new financial institution that's been created and was created by Congress after the 2008 financial crisis was created as part of Dodd-Frank. Instead of consolidating regulatory power, they actually created a new regulatory agency, which is called the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. We've talked about it in the past. CFPB, one of the most rotten, evil, disastrous entities. It was created by Elizabeth Warren. Musk said he wants to get rid of it. Great. I mean, that would be amazing if we got rid of this, right? Because it's a monster and employs hundreds of people and it does massive damage. To get rid of it, you would have to have an act of Congress. You would have to get 60 senators, I'm pretty sure, to get rid of the Consumer Financial Protection Board. I don't see how you can do that. So a lot of interesting talk, right? But not a real path, not a clear path of how you get it done. And what I want is sustainable, real deregulation. is getting rid of regulations, getting rid of controls. Here it just seems like it's reshuffling the chairs. It's just reshuffling responsibilities. It's not actually getting rid of regulations. So we will see. Again, these are all the kind of reforms that have been talked about in the past. This is not new, and this is the thing about DOGE. Most of the kind of things that they're going to come up with are things that there have been bipartisan commissions in the past, and there have been bipartisan efforts in the past to get done, and they've always failed. Now, maybe this time there's the political will to get it done. I don't see it. I don't see it. The other thing about this is, and this I'm devoting a whole show to in a few days, completely deregulating the financial sector, which is what needs to be done, is hard. It's hard. It's like one of those towers where, you know, you can take out the pieces, and you have to make sure that as you take out the pieces, the tower stays stable. The financial industry is so dependent on regulations that you have to be very careful on how you deregulate it so that you don't cause a massive collapse and a massive crash. It really takes thought. So it's very hard to do, even if you have the political power to do it and the political will to do it. And I don't see where the political power and the political will comes from. Okay, so, yep. It's also true that major changes in financial regulations, major changes in financial regulatory bodies don't happen outside of major financial crises. So it'll be interesting to see if they can pull this off. Again, the motivation is going to be tricky. If they can get rid of the CFPB, wow, that would be amazing, amazing. So I'm excited about the fact that they're talking about it, but my expectations are very, very low. Which is good. My expectations of this administration are very low, so I can only be surprised on the upside. All right, this is a funny story. I think it's a funny story. It's a sad story. Amazon plans to donate $1 million to Trump's inauguration. I mean, I find it funny. So basically, what American business learned from the first Trump administration is that if you don't want to get on Trump's bad side, if you don't want to be harassed by Donald Trump, if you want to have a seat at the table in terms of how he's going to regulate or not regulate your industry, you got to be nice to him. You got to bribe him. You got to play ball. You've got to make the right political contributions. In other words, you know, this is cronyism on steroids. Now, granted, everybody does it, yes, but it is interesting that Amazon, which I don't think has, particularly a fan of Donald Trump, basically says, we better play nice. We better play it nice. I mean, last time, Jeff Bezos had a hard time with Trump. And I think this time, if you remember, he stopped the Washington Post from endorsing Kamala. And now Amazon, his Amazon, is giving Donald Trump $1 million for the inaugural celebrations. He is probably, he is slated to visit Trump next week in Mar-a-Lago to have a schmoozing with Trump. And it looks like Mark Zuckerberg is the Meta, basically, the company, is also going to make a $1 million contribution to Trump's inaugural fund. Anyway, everybody's lining up to kiss the ring. Everybody's lining up to be nice to Trump. This is not the behavior towards a president who is going to be a bringer of free markets. This is the behavior of people who are afraid that Trump's central planning instincts are going to be hurtful to them and their business, and they're shoring up bribing their way into his good side so that they don't get attacked. This is cronyism at its worst. And by the way, Bezos is probably worried by the fact that Elon Musk is so close to Trump. He competes with Elon Musk with Blue Origin in terms of space, or at least would like to compete. I don't think he's competing yet, but would like to compete. They are competing for a lot of government contracts, and Bezos wants to be at the table. And to be at the table, you got to pay up. You got to pay up. American politics at its best. This is where we are today. All right. Finally, this is just a horrific story and a real indication of the state of our culture and the decay, at least of parts of our culture, the decay of parts of our culture, the shallowness and superficiality of it is pretty shocking. You've probably seen the story. It's all over. People are commenting on it, on this woman, Lily Phillips, I think her name is, who had sex with 101 men in a day on camera. Sex with 101 men in a day on camera. I think after she did it, she didn't seem too happy about the experience. I mean, this is this is so disgusting, offensive, stupid. And she has a right to do it. It's not illegal to have sex with 101 men in one day. But just think about 24 hours, 100 men. It's 4 an hour. If you go 24 hours, you probably don't go 24 hours. So it's more than 4 an hour. It's disgusting for everybody. You're just a container. It's not sex. And how could she not feel empty, violated? And what about the men? Who are these creeps? Who would want to have sex with a woman who's on a chain thing of one after the other? It is despicable and horrible, and the fact that she could, the fact that people will watch this, the fact that she probably made a lot of money on it. I think this is on OnlyFans. It says something about how shallow and horrible and just disgusting the culture in which we live is. Sex, this amazing, beautiful thing, is turned into what? Spectator sports? It's not a man and woman anymore. I don't know what it is. The words. It's hard to find the words to describe how ugly and despicable this is. And the fact is that this creates, real waves in the culture, and people respond to this, and people are engaged with this, and that there are people that are interested in participating, watching, consuming all of this. Not a good sign. Not a good sign. This is kind of I guess the peak porn. This is the ultimate in porn. So I feel sorry for her, and I feel sorry for anybody participating in it. It's pretty despicable and disgusting. But there it is. In what is missing in our culture, which is the positive. What is missing is a positive view of sex. So you've got Ben Shapiro talking about this, and his attitude is, of course, well, this is what happens when you have sex outside of marriage, and this is what happens when you have a culture that elevates sex like this, and you have the Christian conservatives flipping out completely. But their antidote, their answer to this is to repress and to stop and to block and to deny sex and to deny the value of sex, and outside of marriage, of course. And that's how we got into this mess. That's how we got into this mess. It's the repression that Christianity creates around sex that results in the absurd, materialistic, disgusting material, promiscuity that much of our culture participates in. And so without that repression, without that the pretty disgusting view of sex that Christianity has, you would never get this kind of backlash. What we need is a proper view of sex. Sex as a healthy, beautiful, amazing, pleasurable, satisfying activity that a man or woman, or two men or two women, can engage in and enjoy, but that it is both a physical and a spiritual thing. It is ultimately about values. It is ultimately about visibility. It's ultimately about a real bond between the people involved. And when you take that bond away, when you take the spiritual element away, when you take values away, it becomes like it's a robot. It becomes meaningless, and it becomes just horrible and disgusting. And this is the consequences. This is a consequence of kind of the dichotomy that views, if I'm going to combat Christianity, then I have to combat it with pure materialism. Sex should be something that people enjoy inside marriage, outside of marriage, but enjoy with people they value, people they like, people that they can bond with, people that they really enjoy having sex with. I mean, one of the maybe good things that happened with this woman is that the interview that she did afterwards, it was so clear how traumatized she was by it. Maybe people will rethink their attitude towards sex as a result. I don't know, but it really, to view sex as an empty material act is horrible. To view sex as this, one, you can only do it with one person ever in your life, and it's almost like an act of communal with God, is wrong, and the one feeds off the other. A objective approach to sex is dearly needed in our world. All right, let's see, where do we want to go? Thank you guys for getting us to the goal for the first hour. I appreciate that. All right, that is I'll call that the news. There's a lot of other stories we can cover. We'll do that as we get back. By the way, I will be back home, so we will get on a more normal, regular schedule, soon, this coming week. Okay, let's see what kind of questions you guys have for me. What are the questions? There we go. All right, let's start with JB. Have you heard of the Hudson River School? I wrote a research paper in college on the American landscape movement in the 19th century. I think that the paintings are some of the highest quality in the whole world. Yes, I mean, American landscape painters, Bierstadt, Church, and others are some of the best in the world. They're truly beautiful. If you go the National Gallery, I think in Washington, D.C., has some amazing paintings. The spectacular landscapes, they emphasize the drama of them. Man is always very small in these photos, but the emphasis is always on the grandeur of the landscape. They traveled a lot throughout America. They went to places like Yosemite, and they drew the mountains and the cliffs, and they just spectacular paintings. So yes, some of the best landscape paintings in the world are from the Hudson River School, the painters that came out of that school and traveled the country. American painters probably excelled most at landscapes. Jennifer, do you get a sense of emotional repression there in Japan or no? don't know. It's because, part of the problem is that it's hard to read people in other culture. That is, that they obviously don't respond the way we do. And there's certain habits and behaviors that they have that we don't. The bowing, the handing of business cards almost as a ceremony. But just facial expressions and all. I mean, the people I know here, the objectivists here, the people that I hang out with when I'm in Tokyo, not repressed at all. I don't see any emotional repression by them. They're vivacious. They seem happy. They're engaged. They get excited. They're human. And I don't think they're rationalistic at all. They tend to try to have a first-hand grasp of objectivism. So I don't know enough about people out there. But I went to this party, it was a get-together, and it was mainly men. It was almost all men. And, they were hanging out. You could have been anywhere in the world. I don't think there was anything uniquely Japanese or particularly repressed. So I have to say no. I also will say this. When I first came to Japan in 2004, first time I came, one of the things that kind of I noticed is in the business areas, kind of the areas I'm in, everybody wore the same clothes. Everybody was in a suit and tie. Everybody was, they all wore uniform. And one of the things I've noticed in the last couple of visits here is that uniform is gone. People wear much more casual clothes. They're much more casual, more broadly. So I think some of the elements of oppression, some of the elements of collectivized appearance are gone in Japan. It's, individualism is on the rise. Again, that counters the observation about the masks during COVID. But look, I did a talk yesterday on art to people, and they had good questions. They were engaged. They were clearly, they were not repressed. They asked more questions than I typically get it with an audience in Europe. They were very engaged. They were very participatory. So I think there's the caricatures of Japan as being this collectivistic monolith. I think a lot of that has been broken. A lot of that is gone. And while there's still elements of it in Japanese culture, it's a much more individualistic culture than it used to be. And I think it's that part of it might be actually on the ascend, growing. Okay, Liam says, why do these wealthy elitist kids, become so committed to destruction? The tradition seems to have started with Engles, probably even before Engles. It's as if they hate the very system that allows their lives to be so easy and comfortable. Yes, I think part of it is the ease and comfort. They romanticize struggle. They romanticize poverty. They romanticize the effort that previous generations had to go through. They romanticize all these things, and so they to some extent they seek to achieve it. Their lives are simple and straightforward and easy, and psychologically they're searching for meaning, and they can't find it in their lives, partially because they don't challenge themselves, partially because they don't know what to do with their lives, partially because they've been indoctrinated at elite universities, and this is the key. They all go to the best universities. They've been indoctrinated by elite universities about the evils of capitalism and the evils of selfishness and the evils of pursuing a career, and they're drifting, and they're looking for something that doesn't exist. I mean, here this guy is smart. I mean, one of the things that's interesting, you hear a lot about how ripped he is, how good looking he is. There's pictures of him without a shirt, and he's got real abs of steel, right? But he's got everything, and he's got a master's degree, I guess, in computer science. But he's looking for meaning. He's looking for purpose, and purpose and meaning can't come from business, profits. That's what they've been taught. That's what the culture teaches them. That's what the universities teaches them. They have to find it outside. They have to find it in struggle. They have to find it in revolution. So smart kids from wealthy elite families are the ones that get indoctrinated the most in these, leftist ideas. And they're the easiest ones to embrace them because it doesn't cost them anything. And many of them take it seriously, and some of them are going to be found on the barricades. And it really is tragic. But it's, at the end of the day, ideas shape history, ideas shape people. And it's rotten ideas being taught to them at the universities that are ultimately the cause. All right, let me remind everybody you can support the show by using a sticker. You don't have to ask a question. Just do a sticker and a few stickers right now, and we can make the goal for the second hour. All right, let's see. Do you think this is not your average algorithm? Do you think you've created a small army with your Yaron Brook show? Is it time for us to enter physical space instead of only remaining online? Is it time for an objectivist flash mob in Washington, D.C.? And what would this flash mob do? Right? If I invited you all to come to a Yaron Brook show conference event, would you all come? Would enough of you be willing to pay for flights and hotel and whatever the fee would be to make a conference like that worthwhile? What would, just to show up in Washington, D.C., what would we do? So what's the purpose? What is the action that needs to happen? So yes, we have a small army, but it's not an army. We're way too small to launch a revolution, and we're armed with ideas, and the real purpose of this is for you to use those ideas out there in your own life, and for you to use those ideas advocating in your communities and the people you know, so that we grow. But I'm not sure what we would do if we all met up in Washington, D.C., and if we want to do like a conference where we talk and have seminars and discuss ideas and things like that, then I'm happy to do that. That would be fun, but would you come? Would you show up? I'm curious. Maybe we could do a poll. If we held a Yaron Brook show conference and charged, I don't know, $1,000 for the weekend, would you come? And it's not in your backyard. You have to travel for it. Right? We could storm the Capitol, of course, yes. To do what? I'm not sure. What would be the purpose? Gail says, how much of a threat do you think Turkey is in the mix of the Middle East? I think it's becoming a real threat. I don't know how seriously to take it in this sense. Turkey's still a member of NATO. They have not expressed a desire to leave NATO. Turkey still gets most of its weapons systems from the United States. Could Turkey really launch a war against anybody? As long as its supply chains are restricted by the United States? If Israel launched a war against Israel or against Saudi Arabia or against, I don't know, somebody, what would the United States stance be? What would NATO's stance be? Would Article 5 be activated? It's complex. So clearly Turkey is doing bad things. Turkey's also not it's struggling economically. But we saw that even Iran struggling economically could do a lot. But Turkish population, I don't know, would tolerate what the Iranian population tolerates. Indeed, we don't have as much Sharia law in Turkey, anywhere near as much Sharia law as Turkey, as we do in Iran. There's a lot more freedom in Turkey because the people demand it. So it's a force. How much damage it can actually do, I don't know. I don't think much in the end. JB, I work as a forest firefighter for a federal agency. Management is bracing for a hold on our seasonal workforce after Trump's transition. How can we continue to manage and provide public safety with the proposed cuts? I don't know. The reality is that the way we have structured firefighting in this country and federalized it to some extent, or at least on federal lands, makes that really, really difficult. And fires are incredibly damaging and destructive. Trump blames a lot of the fires on bad forest management, And I think there's some truth there. That is, I don't think he's making that up. He's getting that information from good people. So I think what he wants to do is put pressure on the various agencies to improve forest management so that there are fewer fires. But it's going to be very difficult if he indeed cuts. Now, remember, Trump isn't the one who decides on your budget. Congress decides on the budget. Trump might have hired Elon Musk and Vivek to propose lots of cuts to government agencies. But Congress has to actually make the cuts. And it's not clear to me that Congress will. It's not clear to me that this, for example, is something they want to do. It depends on which constituencies are being hurt. And so it's going to be interesting to see how the different priorities of Congress versus the president versus DOGE, Elon Musk and Vivek and all these other people, how the different priorities actually play out, how they all work out. And in what sense actually cuts government spending, and in what sense it actually cuts government intervention in the economy, which are related but not exactly the same thing. All right, Hopper Campbell. Has the mixed economy made us more linear rather than exponential thinkers and planners? Yeah, I mean, I think that you can actually, the more regulations there are, the less exponential thinking there is. The less you can imagine something completely new that changes everything. That's why the only exponential thinkers exist in those realms that are least regulated. And the more we regulate, the more we control, the more linear we become, the more stagnant we become. And I think that's definitely where the mixed economy is today. And that's the regulatory state. And this is why it's deregulation is the number one most important thing that you can do. More important than cutting taxes. It's even more important than cutting spending is to deregulate. And deregulate in meaningful, substantial, significant ways. Not just at the regulatory agency level where we just don't enforce certain regulations, but actually get rid of whole blocks and whole agencies that regulate. Even if Republicans pick up another 2 senators in 2026 and another 2 in 2028, which they're likely to do, they'll still be short of the 60 votes, and it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. And remember, not all Republicans are going to vote the same way. Republicans are not monolith, and many of them are going to fight for the interests of their localities, their states, their particular places. Republicans in the Senate and the House are not motivated to cut spending. They're motivated to cut spending in somebody else's state, in somebody else's district, but not in their district and not in their state. And until the American people actually want the government cut, it's not going to happen. And I don't see any movement among the American people to want the government cut. They'll fight it tooth and nail when they realize that those cuts are happening in their neighborhood. Jonathan, thanks for all you do spreading Ayn Rand's ideas. Safe travel. Thank you, Jonathan. Really, really appreciate it. Michael, we can't form coalitions because we need to protect our brand. We can't have people confusing objectivism with something they have already dismissed. I agree. That's why Ayn Rand objected to forming coalitions unless it was on a particular issue. And it was clear that on other issues you disagreed completely. And we try to continue that path. Clark, why is it the case that fascism is able to successfully infiltrate advanced nations like Japan and Germany, while communism is only able to infiltrate backward agrarian societies like Russia? I think because communism actually makes people very quickly much poorer. It demands, for example, the massive redistribution of wealth from the rich and the middle class to the poor. It lowers everybody's standard of living instantaneously, and the rich and the middle class are just not willing to do that. Fascism at least pretends to let you keep your wealth and let you keep your middle class status. Now, over time, it will erode, but it doesn't. Its agenda isn't we're going to make you all equal. Like, that agenda only sells in poor countries. The agenda of we're going to make you all equal sells to the elite that go to elite universities in the US and maybe to some poor people in some poor countries. But everybody else doesn't want to be equal, doesn't want equality of outcome. So fascism, because it's not fundamentally egalitarian, it's anti-egalitarian, is more popular than communism. Egalitarianism, as is equality of outcome, at the end of the day, is not a very popular ideology. It's very rare that people take it seriously. It's small groups. Now, it's hard to argue against by the mainstream because the egalitarians have the moral high ground. So they get a lot of what they demand. But nobody actually wants to be an egalitarian, and certainly no middle class or rich country wants to give up middle classhood and richness in order to satisfy the egalitarian whims. Right? James, could you have Harry Binswanger on to discuss Trump's re-election? I'm curious to hear his views. Sure. I think he views it pretty catastrophically. I think he's pretty negative from what I've seen on Trump's re-election. But we will have him on at some point. I can ask him. Not your average algorithm. The Republicans are simply less closed off to Ayn Rand than the left, even if they have been certain conservatives who condemn Rand. She has penetrated the right in a way she can never do to the left. Yeah, but what effect has that had? What effect has that had? As far as I can tell, the right has become more collectivist, more tribal, more statist, more central planish, more fascist. So if Ayn Rand has penetrated them and that's the result, why is that a good thing? Maybe that's a really bad thing, because then we get associated with these creeps. Ayn Rand gets associated with them when she's the exact opposite of them. So penetrating is not good enough. It has to have a positive impact. And has it had a positive impact on the right? Is the right more free market because of Ayn Rand? Maybe, but then it's scary to think what they would have been without Ayn Rand. Right now, the right is not free market. So you could, I think 10 years ago, your statement would have made a lot of sense, because it really looked like there was a free market right, Tea Party and stuff. But the free market right has disappeared. It's gone. Trump killed it. Maybe he was already dead. I don't know. But Trump killed it. Just look at the trajectory of Ted Cruz. Do you think Ted Cruz would read Atlas Shrugged from the floor of the Senate today? I don't think so. And if he does, then it's complete evasion, because he's moved so far away from the ideas of freedom and capitalism. Look at Marco Rubio. The Tea Party failed, and the consequence of that failure, Trump, and the consequence of that failure is while people in the White House, many people in the White House have probably read Ayn Rand and think she's influenced them, doesn't appear that way from the outside. Liam says, did the guy who shot the health insurance CEO want to get caught? It's no fun being Robin Hood if no one knows who you are. He is a narcissist exhibitionist. It's possible he is traveling around with a backpack with a gun. Why didn't he throw the gun away? And with a manifesto, so if he gets caught, they know it's him. Maybe subconsciously he wanted to get caught, and consciously he didn't. That's probably what was going on. So he made the mistakes on purpose. So, hard to tell. I don't know how the mind of these creeps work. Michael, do you think because Silicon Valley doesn't face a lot of regulatory burdens, they don't see how bad it is for other sectors of society? Yeah, I definitely think that's the case. Although, Peter Thiel has written about it, about how there's no innovation in the world of atoms basically because of regulation. Yeah. Sorry, I'm distracted for a minute. see. So I think yes, to some extent they don't understand it, to some extent they don't care. Rue Downs, who invented capitalism? Who was the first to put it into motion? Well, it depends what you mean by capitalism. If you mean by capitalism the system of government where individual rights are protected, where property is privately owned and property rights are protected, I think the United States, the founders of America invented the political system that is capitalism. In terms of its economic components, much of that was established in the UK in the early 19th century, late 18th century, early 19th century. But I think it's the founders who invented the political system that is capitalism. James, what do the leaders of North Korea get from keeping their population starving and living worse than animals? Haven't most dictators realized to show off your country you need a little capitalism? But their goal is not to show off the country. Their goal is to have themselves worshipped. They're narcissistic, power-lusting monsters. Monsters. They're not human beings, they're monsters. This is why it was so distasteful, so evil, for Donald Trump to meet the brutal dictator of North Korea and have a bromance with him. Right? This is a monster, an evil, disgusting monster. So, no, I mean, it's not about showing off their country. It's about being worshipped. It's about being controlling. Rue Downs, I'm curious about your chat with the modern artist. What was his defense of modern art? What are the common defenses of modern art? It's very hard to tell. The reality is that most of the time I don't understand really what they're saying, and what a lot of the discussion was him agreeing with me and then saying things that are exact opposite of me. But I don't know. The defenses are, this is expression, Yaron, you don't understand. This is a new language that, yes, people need to be educated about. Yes, they don't understand, but we need to educate people about it. This art is deep, and people see a lot of it if they're educated to see it. So a lot of it is about educating people in this new language of modern art. A lot of modern art requires reading an essay to understand it. I think that disqualifies it from art, just that fact. But the defense is mainly just subjectivism. I want it to be art. Why can't it be art? Who are you to tell me what art is? That's usually the defense. Not your average algorithm. If anything in existence is either a solid, liquid, or gas, what is light? I don't know that everything in existence is a solid, a liquid, or gas. I don't think it is. So what is light? Light seems to be some combination of solid, proton, and a wave. The fact that, there's such a thing as energy, for example. Energy is usually this combination of wave and particle. So I don't think you can break reality up into solid, liquid, gas. Reality has a lot more than that. Like, what is an atom? Is an atom a solid, a liquid, or a gas? Is an electron a solid, a liquid, or a gas? I don't think those concepts apply to subatomic particles. And therefore, they don't apply to light, which is a subatomic particle moving through space. But it's energy. But what is energy, right? I'm not a physicist, but you can't have a simplistic view of what constitutes reality. Michael says, can you reach out to Mike Israetel? He's a very famous YouTube fitness trainer who has quoted Ayn Rand and has been making videos about objective morality. Yeah, I've seen some of his stuff. I'll try to reach out, see if he'll come on the show. That could be interesting. Liam, it seems that poor people are less envious than wealthy people. It's always upper crust youth running these nihilistic Marxist causes like Antifa and BLM and targeting CEOs. Yeah, but I don't think it's envy. I don't think it's envy that's driving them. I think it's just, it's envy, yes, in a sense of hatred of the good for being the good, yes. It's nihilism, it's lack of purpose, lack of meaning. It's complete drift, lack of focus, lack of thinking. It's always the people who can afford to think that reality doesn't exist, or reality is anything I make of it, or reality is, or reason is not a tool of cognition. They can, in a sense, afford to think these things, these thoughts. They're also the ones who get exposed to the bad ideas at the universities in a more intense way than others, because others don't go to those universities. As I said before, there's a sense in which life is too easy for them, and they're being told to look for purpose outside of them, and their university professors give them a purpose: hatred of capitalism. Dominique, how do you reconcile the deep emotional response to religious art with an aesthetic worldview that rejects its metaphysical foundations? Well, it depends what the religious art is. That is, the Pietà, Michelangelo's Pietà, is theoretically religious art, but it's a mother mourning a brave, heroic son who has died. There's nothing in the artwork that's religious. There's nothing in the artwork that expresses the metaphysics of religion. You can see a painting of a crucifix, and the painting of the crucifix in and of itself does not project a religious metaphysics. It could be Spartacus on the cross, right? Or it could be Jesus, and Jesus in the right context as a hero. It could be a hero suffering for his virtues. So you can hear music is even more so. Music, for example, expresses reverence, religious music. But reverence is not an exclusively religious emotion or feeling. The metaphysical foundation for reverence don't have to be mysticism. They can be just a wonder and appreciation for the grandeur that exists in our world, for a skyscraper, for a business, like, a business success, for a product like an iPhone. You can have reverence that is not religious. So I don't think the art, with some exceptions, some is explicitly religious, and I think it's very hard to have a deep emotional response to it. But most so-called religious art has an alternative metaphysical value explanation or metaphysical value message that you're responding to. Can you write a book on the U.S. healthcare system with a doctor, maybe Amish? Yeah, maybe at some point. Maybe somebody else could do it. I don't need to write all the books. Supikaski. Seeing people of my age defend the whitewashed terrorists of the past, Unabomber, Oklahoma City, Bin Laden, is very emotionally upsetting to me. I feel afraid. Yeah, it should be emotionally upsetting. It's super scary how people are venerating violence, and as long as the violence is targeted at America, as long as the violence is targeted at capitalism, they venerate it, and that is a scary environment to live in. Is Argentina breaking eggs for the omelet of freedom? Not so much. I mean, what are the eggs being broken? There really isn't much. There's some increase in poverty, but it's not huge. It's shrinking all the time. So it doesn't seem to me like there's a breaking egg, that there's a sacrifice going on. Mostly, and if it is, it's very small. It's not like the Lenin breaking eggs, which meant sacrificing tens of millions of people for the sake of some utopian outcome. There's no big sacrifice going on here. It's just increasing freedom. Michael says, do you see Javier Milei's 90% tax reduction? No, I didn't see that. Could Argentina become a first world country by the end of his administration? Well, I don't know how long his administration is going to be. At the end of 4 years, no. At the end of 8 years, unlikely, but at the end of something like 10 years, maybe. Yeah, it could be. So it depends how long it lasts. It's going to take some time. But I haven't seen the tax reduction. I'll have to go look at it. I think that what I did see was he was cutting basically tariffs significantly, maybe that's what you mean. Rando, hey Yaron, thanks for coming down under. It's great to be there. What conclusions have you made about Australia in a philosophical, cultural, and political sense now that you have unfortunately completed your trip to Down Under? Hard to tell. The trip is very short. I only met Objectivists. I didn't get to talk to people out there. I mean, obviously, Australia right now is dominated by a very leftist government, and while there's opposition to it, I don't see there's any principled opposition. I did have the Q&A at the conference. There was quite a few questions about monarchy, which seems weird. And so it seems like following Europe and the United States, the conservatives have gone off the deep end in venerating tradition for tradition's sake. So I think like the rest of the West, Australia is in this impossible philosophical position where it is, I think it will ultimately reject the crazy left. It'll reject the socialists right now in power. It'll reject the people who think that, Aboriginal rights are everything, and we should import as many Gazans as possible into Australia, bring as many Gazans into Australia as possible, which is happening in Australia right now. They just got 3,000 Gazans settled in Australia. That is all going to be rejected. I don't think that is sustainable in a place like Australia. But what's the alternative? The alternative seems to be statism on the right. So from a cultural perspective, political perspective, I think it's just mirroring the rest of the world. I think it's like everything. It's like 3 years behind the United States, and it's still dealing with DEI, where the United States is kind of starting to see DEI shrinking. Australia still needs to get there, but it will. I think it will. So I very much think Australia is basically on the same cultural, philosophical, political trends as the rest of the Western world. As America is, I don't think it stands out in that sense. Philosophically, what I could tell, your university is just as bad as ours, and therefore the ideas are just as bad as ours. I was pretty shocked at what Australia did during COVID. It was worse than most places, and I don't see the kind of backlash against what happened during COVID. Again, but then what is the backlash and how do people interpret it? So I think Australia is very much a part of the Western world. Part of in a sense the sphere of influence of the United States. I don't think it's unique. I don't see a uniqueness in it. It's just a little further to the left than the U.S. because the whole world is, in a sense, further to the left. But I don't see, and I certainly don't see any kind of vibrant free market element within Australia, or Japan for that matter, which is sad. Thank you, Randall. Really appreciate the 50 Australian. Rue Downs, his manifesto referenced the greater good and something bigger than yourself. This kid's needed Ayn Rand, the antithesis of these ideas. Yes, he did. And again, this is the whole point of he wanted purpose. And where do you seek purpose? In the greater good and something outside of yourself. That's what he's being taught. That's what the culture inculcates in him. Neo, is Turkey being in NATO, does it help Israel in the sense that it can't attack it? Would it if it weren't in NATO? I doubt Turkey would attack Israel. It's got too much to lose, and it would lose. As big as Turkey is, it would still lose. I don't think it can compete with Israel. It would be a devastating war. It's far stronger than Iran. It's far stronger than Egypt. So it would be a really difficult war with Israel, but Turkey would suffer real consequences. And I don't think Erdogan wants that. He would like to isolate Israel. But I don't think he actually wants a hot war with Israel. I think being in NATO helps. Turkey being dependent on U.S. arms helps. Turkey being a part of this entity, NATO, that's generally broadly pro-Israel, definitely helps. Subikask, part of de-radicalization is debunking the left and right populist ideas, and we live in a corrupt, unfair, unjust society ruled by wealthy elites. Absolutely. we have to debunk that. But more importantly, we have to recognize that there is an element of truth in it, and then offer a real alternative, a radical alternative. And the radical alternative, of course, is capitalism. It's freedom. It's self-interest. So there is something there, but we have to name it and show them the real cause of it. Rue Downs, are there any objectivist interior designers out there? I would love to meet you. I'm struggling with modern design. Post in the comment section. Okay, I don't know, but if you are an objectivist interior designer, contact Rue Downs, and yeah, he'd love to talk to you. And did you ever read the Philadelphia Declaration? Yeah, I did, the Atlas Society thing. Yeah, I mean, it's I think significantly flawed. I think what they're trying to do is significantly flawed. I think the mission is significantly flawed. The whole idea of trying to create a coalition is significantly flawed and mistaken. And it's exactly what Ayn Rand argued against. It has to compromise. It has to water down in order to form the coalition. And I think that's a huge mistake when it comes to the philosophy, when it comes to these basic ideas. I don't know if it's worth doing an actual critique of it. Jason, should Biden sell U.S. government-held Bitcoin as suggested by Peter Schiff? Yes, I mean, there's no reason for the government to hold Bitcoin. There's no reason for the government to hold any financial asset. And it's not clear why the government holds gold in the current world, in a fiat world. Only if it one day intends to go back to the gold standard. So, yeah, it doesn't make any sense. The U.S. needs money. So selling Bitcoin, selling land, sell property, sell everything it can in order to pay back its debts. It shouldn't be taking on more Bitcoin when it should be buying back its bonds. It should be paying off its debts. No, speculating. All right, guys, I'm going to call that a day. Once I get back home, we'll have longer shows. We'll get more in depth into some of these topics. That'll start on Monday, maybe Saturday, we'll see. But yeah, let's just count on Monday, probably take the weekend off. So I will see you all on Monday. Have a great weekend. Have a great rest of your Thursday and then a great Friday. And I look forward to getting back to Puerto Rico and doing these shows on a regular basis throughout December. Don't forget December 31st. We're doing our big fundraising show, the year in review, and a look into 2025. And we're going to hopefully raise a lot of money for the Yaron Brook show to keep this rolling, to keep our little army going. Thank you, guys. See you soon. Bye, everybody.